Thanks everyone for joining today. We'll get this kicked off. Appreciate everyone joining right after the US holiday. So today we're going to be diving into how DevRel marketing and sales can and should work together better. I feel like this is an issue at any company. Like departments have a habit of getting siloed, particularly I feel like a lot of times it's sales and communicating with other departments that they work hand in hand with. Both Dave and Kurtis have a lot of experience in this area. In fact, Kurtis, I feel like you've been pretty vocal about it on LinkedIn lately. So I'm going to love hearing both your opinions. But if you two could each give a quick intro on yourself, your organizations, what you guys do. And then after that, we'll dive into the talking points. Just for the attendees, we'll spend 45 minutes going through some talking points on the subject. And then we'll use last 15 for Q&A. Definitely take advantage of the Q&A functionality in Zoom. So with that, Dave, let's have you kick it off, man. Mind doing a quick intro?
Sure. My name's Dave Neary. I kind of came into developer relations through open source participation, open source community management. So I've been involved in open source communities since the late 90s, the late 20th century.
That's crazy to say out loud. Mm-hmm. Yeah, go ahead.
So I've been involved in open source for maybe 30 years. Worked as a product manager and community manager for an open source company around 2005, 2006, and have been working in community management or developer relations since, crossing multiple types of projects and multiple types of areas. Right now, I work for Ampere Computing. I've been at Ampere for a little over 3 years. We make CPUs. So developer relations for a hardware company is very different from developer relations for a software company. The people I'm trying to convince to use our thing are not actually the people buying our thing. So it's kind of been an interesting change for me. It's we don't have anything to sell in the DevRel team at Ampere, but we're really trying to raise awareness of why our thing is good.
As is the life of open source. Totally understand. Yeah. Kurtis, how about you, man?
So I'm going to start from, further back. So I had a career in software engineering, but also like transferred even into that, but did about 10 years of software engineering, ended up with me at Major League Soccer. I was a tech lead for the UI team there. I had recognized some opportunity for us in technologies like React Native and GraphQL. However, at the time that those were coming out, there were some companies that were definitely like putting this up into production, but there wasn't yet like the mass amount of content produced by these people about how they were doing it and, best practices, catch 22s and things, just basically not wanting to implement these things in a black box, so to speak, to like check my ideas on implementation against others. So in order to selfishly achieve that goal, I started writing blog posts about GraphQL and React Native. I started GraphQL NYC meetup. And then I just started getting like more and more into that space. And I realized like how much I was enjoying that. I had already contributed to open source along the way, like as a software engineer as well. So all those things just kind of like culminated in pulling me into the DevRel space. It was about like 8 years ago now. And then from there, I did like some developer experience engineering, advocacy, a couple other roles, and then leadership. And then now that, culminated with me heading DevRel for Slack. So senior director of DevRel Slack. I've been there almost 3 years, coming up on that pretty soon. It's been really great. I've been a longtime Slack platform user, literally since like they released it. I built an app called Emojinary. So you could like play Pictionary with emoji in Slack. It was a lot of fun. Anyway, I digress. But yeah, that's it. That's me in a nutshell. DevRel, all the things.
Awesome. Love it. One day I'll convince my D&D crews to get off Discord and move to Slack. I'm a bigger Slack fan.
There you go.
Yeah, I'm trying.
You said D&D, huh?
Yeah. That, right? Oh. No, it's a little blurry. I can't see the background.
That's the Dungeon Master Manual, Player's Handbook, and Monster Guide, of course.
Yeah, we'll have to have a separate chat about how that recent sale of that organization, how it's treating that.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, great. So just to remind everyone, we're chatting about the relationship between marketing teams, sales, and DevRel teams these days, and just do what you can to get everyone into alignment. Always like to start wide in these conversations. So let's define what we're talking about and then move forward into more specifics. So historically, when you guys think DevRel, I know this is obvious, but let's just position ourselves here. How are we defining ourselves versus or in opposition to like how marketing or sales define themselves? Because when you look at the big picture, very similar goals, right? Approach from different angles. How do you guys differentiate between the three?
Art, you pick this first.
Yeah, if you don't mind. Yeah, I kind of posted about this on LinkedIn before, and I feel like the evolution of DevRel itself kind of played a large part, initially at least, in how DevRel got along with and worked with other teams. And I feel like as we started to become more of a function and more prevalent, we started to get a lot of pushback, like, oh, DevRel is just sales or DevRel is just marketing, right? And so the natural response to that is, no, we are not marketing. We're not sales. Here's why. Because, marketing is doing X, but we're talking to you like Y. And sales is doing, Z, but we're over here with A. But in reality, like that barrier that we created is like artificial at best, right? But whenever you define like your whole identity in opposition to something, that's going to end up leading to like ramifications throughout how you interact as a business. And so for me personally, I went through this. Like I did this. Literally, I used to say, like, I'm not marketing. I'm not sales. So when I say like we or that, like I'm literally talking about my experience of messing this up multiple times. So then what happens is I'm not using marketing's metrics when I'm doing marketing related things. I'm trying to come up with my own things to measure it and then get them to trust those metrics and, spend all this cognitive energy understanding how my metric feeds their metric. And I could have cut out all that noise and just said, like, we're doing X, Y, and Z, which rolls up into this metric that you follow and understand. It started making me try to work around given processes. Like I would never want to say developer funnel. Like, oh, I'm not trying to push developers through a funnel. But like the reality is like developers do like move through a kind of progression, a mile. We literally say map the developer journey, right? Like right through. And you best believe that it's way bigger up here at the awareness front where they start than it is down here with people who get successful, and that turns into a funnel. So, I just think that I spent a lot of time having to unlearn, and I'm recreating the exact same things that were already in place, people already trusted and understood. And all that mattered is if I just went out there and actually did my job as a trusted, credible source, like put people before the technology, like I would have got the same results.
I think you were on the button there with those two words at the end, trusted and credible. Mm-hmm. I think the key difference between traditional marketing and sales roles and DevRel is we're not necessarily selling the same product, right? The end result is not the same. We're not selling it. We're not selling, in the case of a project, we're not selling the project itself. We want somebody to invest their time to build something on top of that product, right? It's a different product. It's essentially,
yeah.
But we don't even like to think of it as a product because, as you said, it's about putting people before technology. It's about relationship building over time. Yeah. But I will say, historically, it's not all been DevRel saying we're not sales and marketing. It's also been about who are the people who ended up in the early days of DevRel in developer relations roles or open source community manager roles. It was the junior people who liked giving presentations at events and liked writing blogs, but they were relatively junior and defined themselves by the technology first and not by product market fit or, business goals. And so they were looked down on in many, I've been in this area, this space myself, where I couldn't get traction with sales and marketing folks because they didn't understand what I did. They didn't know why I was doing it, and they didn't understand how I could help the business. And so part of my learning journey was realizing that, we have to reach out to those folks and explain to them how we help them do their job.
Absolutely.
You're leading right into where I wanted to try it next. It definitely takes two to tango, right? So there's stuff sales and marketing could do to communicate better with us at DevRel. But like, what are some of the like significant costs you guys have seen of like when things aren't working in unison? What are the big pain points that occur when these three areas aren't speaking well together? We'll obviously get into the details in a little bit, but maybe hit like your top two or three of the major pain points that exist when organizations are running in unison.
Actually, David, why don't I let you take this one first, though, and then
Yeah.
Well, I mean, one that's come up particularly in open source community management for me, and apologies, I'm going to kind of treat those identically, open source community management and where you're trying to recruit users of software, so investing time, not money, versus developer relations where you're asking people to invest time in something building on top of a product. But I'm going to use those interchangeably. I hope it's not too distracting. But one of the things that I've noticed is like the open source community is getting shortchanged. And as a result, the sales and marketing teams missing out on opportunities, because the first experience that people have in an open source community is they're going to download and they're going to try and use what they can use for free, right? So they're downloading your product, they're downloading the community version of your open source project. And if it's a terrible experience, they're not going to make a sale. And sometimes you can see the early signals. Like we see the domain names of people who are signing up to our forums and who are having trouble using our thing. And we see that it's like Fortune 500 companies who are trying to use our product to prove out to their, like it's going to be somebody at the lower levels. It's going to be an engineer trying to use the product so that they can tell their boss, we should buy this product. And so that's one of the biggest disconnects I've seen, is where there's this massive disconnect between developer relations and sales and marketing, is that the first time that people try and use your thing, whatever it is, they end up having a bad experience, which then prevents you from making the sale.
Yeah, I agree 1,000,000%. Developer experience as competitive advantage. I think a lot of people, like you said, they're not realizing that the kind of triangle has flipped, and where before it was leadership saying we're going to use X, and then that would kind of flow throughout your tech org. It's teams, grassroots teams on the ground, adopting this and saying, hey, this is a better way. And then literally championing it and trying to get buy-in across their orgs. You nailed it. Like that is so prevalent, and teams that get that are going to do way better than teams that don't.
Could I agree more? I'm actually going to drop a LinkedIn post I've been sharing like crazy. This guy went around and interviewed a ton of CTOs, asking about their buying journey, and over half of them, when they are evaluating a new vendor, just push it off to someone else. They don't even look at it. They just push off to the implementer and say, let me know what you think. Is this something we can do internally? Do we need to buy someone? And everyone's like, oh, we only talk to signers. We only talk out. Like, we'll see how that works out for you. So, on that subject, what are maybe some of the common areas of DevRel where there's high value and those other two departments, marketing and sales, just didn't traditionally have a grasp of how much value there is in it? Maybe some specific areas within DevRel that, over the years as we've evolved, that we've had to drive understanding of value in. Let's maybe start with you this side, Kurt.
Yeah. I'll tackle a couple. So a lot of my experience over the last few years has been at larger companies, so I'll focus there. I think a lot of times we look at DevRel with our lens externally focused, maybe too much. And I understand, that is a very critical and core part of the job. But training the trainers, meta enablement. DevRel is perfectly positioned to teach solution architects, TAs, even AEs, CSMs, like the list goes on, right? Like you can literally help everyone better understand how your platform works, how your tools work, where to find those best practices, where to get answers. Because, an interesting thing too, even just to know how to talk about the tool, do this next time. Just pick 5 random people in your org, right? Like a trail of a workflow of it might go, and then explain them something about your platform or tool, and then tell them to pass it down to the AE, and then have the AE come back and explain it to you. And what you get back is going to be wildly different than what you told that first person. And I think we often forget that even internally, and especially the larger your organization gets, there is often layers of lack of context between you creating some kind of deck or something like that, and then it actually being absorbed by like somebody who is talking to customers or working with somebody on the ground. So I think meta enablement is like an area that gets overlooked a lot, and that affects everyone. That helps honestly all your verticals.
Yeah, totally agree. I will say that one of the functions of developer relations that sometimes get shortchanged is that feedback loop that Kurtis is talking about. Hearing about, you get the grassroots feedback from developers who are trying to do things with your product. And that's an opportunity for you to help make the product better. But not all developer relation teams are good about feeding that feedback back up. And not all product teams are good about taking that feedback and acting on it. So that's one of the biggest missed opportunities. I will also say, similarly, what I was saying earlier, you've got the missed sales opportunities from not understanding what that initial experience that people have with your product is.
I preach all the time that developers, if they can't find your quick start guide or like they can't click, they're gone, man. They're already on to the next competitor. And we'll talk to these huge $1 billion companies and they just have no clue what their dev experience is like. And they're wanting to talk about pumping up their blog content. Like, maybe fix your documentation first, and then we could talk about content moving forward. Totally agree. So we've defined ourselves. We've defined some of the pitfalls. Let's now define what we view the dev maturity journey as, right? So like, what is that dev funnel, Kurtis, that you were applying to? After that, we can start jumping into how we can be more cross-functional across departments. So could you sort of walk us through the key phases of DevRel maturity that you've observed, Kurtis?
Oh, yes, absolutely. So the phases of maturity essentially is like, first we're in opposition, right? And again, it's not everyone, but it's like, hey, we're in opposition to these other departments. And so like, that's when you're going to be taking a lot of like counteractions. I'm counter measuring. I'm like counter processing, right? Like, you're doing the exact same things they're doing, but you're just like on your own doing them. Then there's more of like the understanding, like for a lot of folks, the realization comes like you start to pattern match. Folks in DevRel are pretty good at pattern matching. And you're like, wait, this kind of is the exact, like we both have a content calendar. We're both doing an event strategy. We're both like creating these decks, like for sales calls. We're both doing X, we're both doing Y. And so then that's when people start to say, well, hey, like maybe there's like room here to like do that. So you'll start to adopt those metrics, adopt those processes, but you're still not like doing it with them, but at least now you're mirroring each other. So then when you hit that next phase, when you start getting into partnership, right? Or like I say, I guess it's more like partnership. That at that point, now you're like actually saying, well, wait, if they already have a content calendar, how can DevRel actually just contribute to that existing system instead of having one of our own as well, even if they're in perfect alignment, right? Like, why two? Like question those assumptions. And then you're going to start finding that as you get these small wins, that doesn't seem big, but what you're doing is creating alignment and context, right? That's shared now. And that becomes powerful. We know that, right? Because now you're starting to think about campaigns and content more holistically and more across the org. You start getting, understanding of what marketing's thinking ahead of time, whereas before you might have just been reacting. So it just starts to like ingrain you more into their processes. And that's what you want, to not have DevRel at the tail end of every vertical at the bottom, right? You want to be involved from the beginning, ideally. Yeah.
Yeah, the worst thing to do to a sales process is bring in new decision makers late. Like, you want to make sure they're involved along the whole path. And it's something every sales guy knows. He's just not applying it to the whole audience. Totally agree. So
I don't really have much to add. The only thing I'll add to that is one of the benefits of working with the marketing and sales teams, using their language and their frameworks and doing all of the things that they kind of expect and come to understand, is that you have the opportunity to infuse developer messaging into your core messaging as opposed to it being an add-on. You're also building trust, right? all of a sudden you've got account managers calling you to say, hey, I'm talking to these guys next week and I really want you to come along to keep me honest and to make sure I'm credible when I'm talking to more technical folks. So yeah, I see it as being about building trust and about infusing developer messaging into core messaging rather than having it being an add-on.
Absolutely. Well said.
So when it comes to like, okay, other teams are sort of starting to recognize the benefit of some of those phase switches. How do you drive the integration with other teams? Once you start seeing like the light bulb starting to go off, it probably comes down to communication, right? So you start with you that one, Dave.
Well, I mean, my experience is that once other teams start to see you as being valuable to their goals, you don't have to drive very much. You just see a lot more meetings showing up on your calendar. Like, we're sketching out H1 event planning. And all of a sudden, instead of doing that for developer events on your own, you're now being scheduled on calls in July and August the year before. And you're being asked your opinion. You're being asked to propose your event priorities and what you want to achieve there. Same thing with account-based management, account-based marketing, right? It's about having the developer aspect just be another tab on that spreadsheet, another paragraph in the planning. And as long as you engage with that process when you're pulled into it, you'll keep getting engaged. But all of a sudden it changes your job a little bit, right? You end up being a little bit less duct tape and string, and a little bit more following rigorous processes, and it adds overhead, right? It's not always smooth sailing.
That's it. YAP. I call that YAP. Yet another program, right? Everything turns into a program. And now you just spend your whole time managing programs instead of participating in them. Absolutely. I have nothing else to add. Yeah. There you go. Yeah. I have literally nothing else to add. Very well said.
But there is an element of like, once you start getting looped into those calls, you, particularly if you're big org like Kurtis is, you do have to add some formality to it, right? Just to keep everyone organized and keep communication straight. So as your relationship evolves, like let's say you're at a smaller company, have your Series A, you guys have a sales team, marketing team, and a DevRel team. Your founders are, putting headcount where you need it. How does that relationship evolve moving forward? What structure do you guys like to see put in place to make sure that everyone's working in alignment?
You want to take first pass on that?
Sure. Well, I'll say that the next step to what I was describing earlier is when you start to see the mind shift change, the mindset shift, you have DevRel has an opportunity to go from following to leading. And that's when you start to see the VP of DevRel or the senior director of DevRel. You're no longer grabbing on and holding on to the train for dear life. You're now driving. And you start to own the developer function, really. And all of a sudden, marketing becomes a stakeholder. Sales becomes a stakeholder for you, as opposed to being a stakeholder for them. And that's a very challenging phase change for people who are not used to leading programs that are cross-functional. Certainly, I've had trouble with that, and I don't know, Kurtis, if you have the same experience. But that change from following to leading, from being outsider to following to leading, that can be a challenging journey for people in developer relations.
Absolutely. And honestly, for a long time, I was like, oh, we have like nothing to compare this to, like we're so horizontal, which is like true. Like if you think about it, when you bring on like a junior community person, junior advocate, everyone, maybe you can get away with it with a DX engineer. The socio aspects of the jobs are immediately higher than they are comparatively to like a junior and almost in a bunch of other fields, right? Like if I'm an engineer and I'm a junior, I start on a team, I'm like in some files, one part of the project, working with a couple surrounding people, and I'm like going out, I'm learning more about the project, learning more about the thing. When you're an advocate, it's like, oh, hey, here's marketing, here's sales, here's customer success, here's the external things, here's our partners, here's this, here's that. And you immediately have that cognitive overhead already. And so as you level up, you just get more and more spread across the org. And if you're in a very big org, it gets to be a lot. However, where I've found a lot of success, there is another team that actually behaves a lot like DevRel, and that is growth teams. And so I've just started deep diving how growth teams operate and how they work horizontally and get strategic buy-in, because almost everything they affect, they don't own. Hey, that's DevRel, right? So yeah, I've just really been using that as a lever to kind of level myself up, because there is not really a lot of precedent for DevRel at this level. And so, again, I don't like to do anything in the dark, right? Like, I'm always trying to find something to check my implementation against. And so growth roles has been, pretty much the closest I've been able to come up.
That's a good comparison, because it's sort of, I know it's going to be viewed as a dirty word in DevRel, which it shouldn't be, but like lead generation, right, man? That's like what we're focused on a lot at the end of the day, is awareness and then turning that into leads.
Yeah. Once
That's
you
pretty
dive
good.
deeper into growth, though, so sorry, real quick, one thought.
Oh, go ahead.
See that it's way more than that. That might just be one lever they pull. Reducing friction in some user journey might be another. Adjusting pricing might be another. And this is why I say it's good to model growth teams, because they touch it all, and they don't control any of it. So they got to do their due diligence to get that buy-in. So if you want to get good at DevRel leadership, get good at growth.
Totally. As guy that runs growth at Draft, like the things that move the needle for me is like, did I engage enough on Slack or Discord, or did I post enough on LinkedIn? Was I building enough brand? Was I communicating with our customer base enough? Like, it's all those little things. People always want to like, give me Google Ads and let me get leads tomorrow. I'm like, no, you got to build that evergreen, that you got to lay out that field so you're getting consistent leads. Yeah.
There'll be changes at every vertical at different times that are more important than others. And like, you'll figure out how to prioritize all that stuff if you just start reading up on like the really good growth experts out there.
Exactly. So this also sort of comes into like, once you're leading from the front, like you sort of have to start speaking their language too. So when it comes to like how you're measuring yourself, how are you communicating that? Like, are you using the same language that marketing and sales usually use so that they have a quick understanding? When it comes to measurables, do you apply some of your own metrics? What path are you guys taking when it comes to measurement, success, all that good stuff?
I'm going to leave that one to you, Kurtis.
Yeah, for sure. I adopt the metrics that make the most sense for whatever audience that is. But I make sure that I can very clearly articulate the actual like tactics that we do that affect that part of the business. Right. And like, I can prove that oftentimes through data. And so I think that like that is the biggest correlation. It's not just about speaking their language. It's about like actually moving the needles that they care about. I can prove like that DevRel has contributed in the last fiscal year, we contributed to over $30 million in opportunity. Right. Like, and I can prove that. Like, I have all of the data to back that up. And I think like things like that, like, but that's a sales thing. If I wasn't using sales data, I wouldn't care about 30 million opportunity. And I'd be saying things like, like we got like X number of feedback from like the customer enablement sessions. Still very valid, very important to DevRel. But leadership does not care about how much feedback I gathered, right? They just care like about results. Did you turn feedback into something that became revenue? Right? Like, that's the world we're in, right? So being able to tie what you're doing to business value and business objectives is probably the most important communication thing that you can develop. And I promise you, if you can do that well, like, you just tie right into their metrics, right into their processes, right into their everything. Be polymorphic. Like, don't make DevRel rigid and then make people work into you. Like, be polymorphic, build the team that supports the needs right now. Like, DevRel over Slack has looked vastly different over the last 3 years because we needed vastly different organization and priorities and activities at different times.
Love it. One of my favorites recently that I saw from a client, like this isn't too unusual in B2B, but in DevRel, they were measuring the success of their content by how many customer service cases it closed on active clients by just being able to share that that article, and that turned into faster renewal timelines on their client base. And then that's clearly what account managers care about. Good stuff all around. Totally. So, Dave, I didn't include this on the talking points, but I think it's a fair angle. And I like you brought it up before we hopped on the call today. So I've worked every aisle of the house, marketing, sales, DevRel. I've even been on implementation teams at like healthcare SaaS organizations. And unfortunately, sometimes sales could be the cool kids at school and don't necessarily work too great with everyone else in the organization. Like we're joking, like on implementation teams, I'd get that SOW in where I was like, dude, I don't even know if we can do this, which you just sold to the client. How do you sort of, you can't control everything, but it takes two to tangle.
Sure.
What are some of the pitfalls you see there and how to drive, better communication?
I mean, the language I used before we started the call is, DevRel used to be, seen by marketing as, the people with no business, or not marketing necessarily, but sales as the people with no business sense, the smelly hoodie wearers over in the corner. And I think that has changed. But yeah, there's a very real danger. I'm not going to. I know I shared the old. I don't know what the comic is, but it's you've got the panels go from what the customer, what the project said and what the customer wanted is the last pane, and it goes through what sales sold, what the product manager specified, and so but. I don't know. I think there is that disconnect. I think we've said it already that erodes over time as you build trust, right? And it's about relationship building, and thankfully, developer relations is about relationship building. So we tend to be pretty good at it.
Absolutely, it's literally all about relationship building, trust, and credibility. If you can get those three things, you can do pretty much anything.
I don't know if I answered your question, Clayton, but I'm not going to do.
Hey, sometimes the best questions are the ones with vague answers. I tell this to people all the time. Like if I get into a new hobby and I'm trying to find who's most knowledgeable in the hobby, it's always the influencers that end all their videos like, I don't know, it depends, maybe. The people that are out there selling black and white are usually not the ones that know what they're talking about. Yeah, I totally agree. So when it comes to, I was going to say, like, when it comes to, I feel like, so I've done about 20 to 24 of these webinars now, and almost every single one of them ends with a big takeaway in our space being people to people, build trust, build authenticity. You can't just market to developers. You've got to come at it from an angle of, like you said, just education, right? So how can DevRel professionals adopt some of the marketing and sales practices without losing that authenticity, that pure standpoint of education? Kurtis, you had a great LinkedIn post on this the other day about like, hey, they've been doing some smart shit for a while over there in marketing and sales. There's probably a few things that we can learn from them too. What are some of those few practices that you guys have sort of integrated into your DevRel efforts in the last couple of years?
I think a few that I'll just a couple quick tips that I'll name up. I think the biggest one is like being more responsible with my engagement. I still believe that engagement is the fundamental foundation of developer relations, but I also do now recognize that you can so quickly get caught up in engaging everywhere that literally that's like all you're doing, and then that kind of minimizes how much you're able to turn those engagements into something meaningful internally, right? If I'm spending all my time talking, I'm not processing, synthesizing, sharing, building that broader context that's going to help me identify the patterns. Oh, this person had this. Oh, wait, if we did something right here, that's going to address like all of their issues, right? So I have to remember, there's literally right now, there's over 1 million people at any given moment using a custom Slack app, and there are thousands of people building one any given minute on any given day. I'll never be able to engage with them all. Absolutely not. There's just absolutely not. So being strategic and ensuring you're showing up when it's meaningful and impactful, but then also being very strategic at other times about how you engage. Marketing does that really well. Another thing marketing does really well that I've learned to love is that like not all content's created equal. I used to think it was. Every single thing needed a dev advocate to write it because every single thing X, Y, Z. No. 100, 200 level content, you probably don't need the person who has being paid like $180,000 a year or some ridiculous number. They like know your product in and out to like explain why this top level thing that could be written by like anybody is cool or important to boost SEO or drive like marketing goals. Offload that. Like your expertise should focus on the content that only your expertise that can produce, and every single thing else you should look to either like delegate, like to get coalition internally, source from community as well, but recognize and reward. Don't just value grab. You got to create value too. And then lastly, if you can get the budget, contractors, right? Like, hey, Draft.dev, I'm sure y'all do a ton of content for
Yeah, a little bit biased there, but
yeah, a little bit biased, but I'm serious. You're filling that exact need, are you not? Yeah, and marketing does that really well, right? And so, like, I try to adopt things like that just to understand. Something I've really appreciated learning from good salespeople. I don't ever start a conversation explaining. I always start a conversation asking questions. 101.
yeah.
Good salespeople, they don't talk to you. They just listen to you for a long time. Then they talk to you.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I'll
What about you, Dave?
Well,
those are great.
Those are both really good. I would, going back to what Kurtis was saying earlier about the funnel. I found the funnel a really useful conceptual tool. It's maybe more of a, we're not kind of moving you towards a sale, we're moving you towards more engagement. So what you measure along the funnel is different, but the idea of a funnel and measuring like what your reach is in terms of awareness, what your membership is in terms of newsletter and forum, and and how sticky those things are, and how long people spend on your website, and then how do you engage with them once they're there. All of these things are really, really valuable, and those are tools that came directly, for me at least, those are tools I learned about from marketing professionals before anything else. I love, Kurtis, what you were saying about salespeople don't start by telling, they start by asking. Definitely something I've tried to cultivate for myself and my team.
Yeah.
I will say that the question, how can we adopt marketing and sales practices while maintaining developer trust? That developer trust for me is really important. And so I would say the first thing, somebody who in DevRel once said to me is like, my personal brand is more important to me than my employer's brand. So I am always going to tell you the truth. I may say things that my employer would like me not to say, but I'm going to tell you the truth because I care more about the relationship that I have with you than I do about the relationship that I have with my employer. I don't know if that's true for everyone. That was certainly true for my friend. And I think it's an important frame to bring to bear is, my responsibility as developer relations is I want to ensure that you have awareness of what our product or project can do for you so that you have, I want you to be happy using it. I'm not necessarily about, I want to maximize how many people are using my thing. I want people who are using my thing to be happy while doing it. At least that's the way I frame it.
That honestly is huge. From a sales guy, I earn more respect and more long-term income from either the prospects I initially told no. I was like, dude, this time's not right. This isn't a good fit. Or we get pushback all the time from bigger companies about comparison pieces where they want to really change themselves to look good. I was like, the devs are going to find out, man. Just be honest about what you guys do well, what the competitor does well. They're going to dig it up anyways.
They're already competing you against the competition, and God forbid they come to a different result than what you've presented.
Yeah, that one always blows my mind. It's just that when you become more concerned about your image than what you actually do, and this is a great life policy for anything, it's always going to be a problem.
Never negative framing. That's a DevRel thing. Never negative framing in your writing, your messaging, everything. We're not better than X. It's a different way of doing Y. It's it's like, why? You don't need to crap on other people. I don't need to compare myself to others. Either what I've got is what I've got and you liking it, or it's not, and that's fine too. If my credibility doesn't stand on just what I'm offering, and I gotta, negative framing is the fastest way to lose developers. One of them, in my opinion.
Totally agree. All right. The question I always end with, what's the one prediction in each of you see for how this relationship changes in the next couple of years? Last few webinars, this question usually ends up focusing on AI one way or another. I'm curious to hear your takes on how you see these relationships growing over the next year or so.
Well, I mean, I'm going to go back to reference AI because apparently it's obligatory. A lot of that 101 and 201 content that Kurtis was talking about, at least I know that people are generating first drafts with AI tooling. I think that's a really good way to. I don't think you can replace junior DevRel people with AI, but I think you can maximize their education and use AI as a way to allow them to be more productive, but realizing that the first drafts you get from an AI tool are drafts. They're not the final product, right? So that's one. I think the adoption of AI tooling to kind of maximize the impact of kind of junior DevRel coming through is one. I will also say I'm going to say that the DevRel function is going to become kind of on a par with a marketing function. So you'll see more chief developer officers over the next couple of years as people realize, this is an important audience. This is a critical audience for the success of our company. So seeing marketing, sales, and developer relations as kind of three functions that are joined. I know that DevRel historically has either been part of a product function or part of a marketing function. I see that changing. I see it being its own thing.
Totally agree. Oh, that first one too, man. We have tried to get AI to make it just write those articles. God, it would make our life.
None of that.
Yeah. We wish, because our overhead would be so much better, but it's just not the reality. Yeah.
It is not the reality. But I agree. 0 to 80. It is something that I apply to AI constantly, both I think in learning curve. So another way, I'm gonna switch off AI, I promise. But I think in better understanding these other departments, like I use AI now to look up acronyms, sales terms, processes, workflows, mental models. I feel like I know now, marketing way deeper than I did, sales way deeper than I did. So, AI, I love to say, it's really good for gap filling expertise, which is kind of that, right? I know enough about marketing to be able to research and look things up quickly and know if what I'm getting is relevant, right? I also know how to use Google. But the difference is when I use Google, I have to do that myself. When I send some app on to do a deep research project, it just did all the Googling for me. And then I just have to come back and verify like I would normally. And it's that human in the loop aspect. It always has to be human in the loop. Much to Dave's point, I agree. DevRel is going to continue to grow up. And, we'll more than likely continue to branch out into our own function in a lot of orgs, and the developer experience and community as a strategic advantage is only going to become more and more important, especially with AI. And this time we're not going to talk about using it, but AI is about to erase differentiation in a lot of ways. People haven't realized that yet, but it is. And only the people who are either extremely novel in how they use it or build really strong communities and platforms around the thing that's relatively novel that they build will succeed. And so, DevRel is going to play an even more important point, because in the year 2025, you're not building a successful business that isn't connected to the internet and isn't extensible, and you just don't get there without developers. You don't.
Totally agree. And we'll probably be early adopters on that front too, compared to some more traditional marketing efforts. But I hope we start seeing it show up in C-suites. Like people, not even CMOs are relatively, I mean, not a new thing, but you still don't see a ton of them at every org. So I'm
Absolutely. And it's been what, 25 years, right? Like even a little bit more, the evolution of like fully fledged marketing orgs, and now look at where DevRel is on that scale, I'd say we're about 5 actual years into like DevRel as like a function where you've got like teams of people. DevRel has been around for a very long time. Don't get me wrong. And I know teams have been around, but where people actually walk around and going like, we have a DevRel team. Like, you know what I mean? That's more autonomous, not like a few people on marketing or a few people within product, and they're your more technical folks.
totally agree. Well, guys, thank you for joining today. We have a quiet audience on our hand. I think everyone's a little groggy coming back from Memorial Day. I had to deal with this might be the case. But Dave, Kurtis, I could talk to you guys for hours. We'll probably have to get you on another one here soon. Anything you want to plug before we get off the line here?
Well, I'm going to point people at the Ampere developer website, developer.amperecomputing.com. Ampere CPUs, I'm going to pitch my thing.
Go for it.
We build ARM64 CPUs that have lots of cores on a CPU. We're the ARM64 instance on a number of cloud service providers out there. And the reason why I think that's important, and one of the reasons why I joined Ampere in the first place, is because the constraints that we have in the data center now are their real estate and their power and their volume, right? Their cooling. And there's a lot of pressure on the grid coming from AI and data center computing right now, the power grid, I mean. And one of the ways that we can combat that is by using less power per unit of compute. And using ARM64 CPUs is one of the chief ways you can do that without sacrificing performance. So I can save you some money. Start up an ARM64 instance on a cloud near you and try it out, and you will see we're cheaper because we're giving you more cores per socket. So the products are not necessarily cheaper for CSPs. We're not competing on price, but they can rent them to users for cheaper because the operating expenditure is less as well. So
there you go.
I don't know, Kurtis, if Slack is using any of the ARM instances on the various clouds you're working on, maybe you can share that. But
that's a good question. I do not know. I do know that pretty much all of our infrastructure, like a lot of folks, is AWS bound. I do not know, but we also run a lot of other things. But I'll be honest, Slack, that's a lot. There's a lot of engineering, and I don't get exposed to all of it. I stay closer to the platform stuff for sure.
Sure.
There you go. Well, Kurtis, anything on your end? Otherwise, we'll drop it today.
I guess the only thing I got, I guess I could share. I think it's pretty safe to share now. So as of a couple of days ago, I've officially signed a contract with A-Press, and I'll be releasing a book on DevRel later this year, actually. So I'm very excited.
I was going to say, but I didn't want to jump the gun. I was wondering if you were going to drop it or not. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to wait until like the ink had dried, so to speak. And so, it's all wrapped up, and ideally it will ship this year, closer towards the holidays. Effective DevRel. Stay tuned. You'll hear more about it.
Love it. Well, I'll drop both your LinkedIn's in the chat. We'll follow up on that too in our Slack email to everyone.
And for people who are interested in developer relations, developer advocacy, I want to call out a book by a friend of mine, Mary Thengval.
Oh yeah,
the business value, Matt Mikado book, right? The business value relations. Mary's welcome, and you should buy the book.
It is good.
Love it. Well, thanks, guys. Appreciate you. We'll have you on again hopefully soon. Otherwise, everyone, thanks for joining today. Be in touch. Appreciate y'all.